Okay, so we had The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid by Bill Bryson. I think that's how you say his last name.
Yeah.
There's the.
I don't think there's any other way to say his last name.
It doesn't work, does it? Okay, that's sad. Okay, so the summary of this is a very scatterbrain book. It's not in chronological order. It's not in really any.
There's no plot.
There's no real plot or timeline. It's just this guy recalling his memories of his childhood, and he talked about, and he lived in the 50s. He's talking about the 50s when he was in the childhood. Yeah, that was his childhood, was in the 50s. He talked a lot about all the newer things that came out, like nuclear bombs was one of them that we've seen for about almost 2 chapters, and it came up all throughout multiple times. Because at the time, the United States tested about 900 nukes in Nevada, and I think a couple.
It adds up to over like 1,000.
Yeah, and they also did some in the Pacific as well. He talked about how the television became a very popular thing at the time, and how movie theaters were they were almost always playing new things, and he always said that they were like tacky things that was always had to do with aliens and stuff like that too.
Radiated seating.
Yeah,
like toilets, I mean.
Yeah, so there was a diner that he went to. This is one that we remembered extremely well. He went to a diner as a kid. It was like a special diner that they go to, and the seats, they'd fold up in these little things in the wall, and it would literally irradiate the seats so they felt warmer, and they were clean then.
Yep, and then you would die of radiation. But he said it was worth every cheek as well. So
Every shriveled cheek.
Yep, those his exact words.
So is it appropriate to say this guy had a lot of humor in his stories?
Yeah,
Yes.
this was super funny.
Should we tell him about his grandma?
No.
I'm gonna
No.
anyways.
Yeah, after the camera's off, maybe.
Okay, yes, I will. It's, yes.
Okay, then it also talks about some of like the more lightheartedness of the time, because people felt like they were invincible. Because there was no wars going on, it was fairly, like, prosperity. People were getting, like, like, he talked about how your fridge, when somebody got a new fridge, it was like somebody else getting their new, getting a pool put in now. It's like, hey, come look at my brand new Whirlpool fridge or whatever, I don't know.
And they,
You're right.
I don't know.
And that's how it was for the time. And he just talks about all the general stuff through the time and how it all advanced. There's no real summary, so I can't really give you like an exact everything he's doing. Yeah.
Because there's not a plot.
Okay.
No.
So some characters. So Bill, he was a kid. He had superpowers. He didn't really use his powers for people like he was around or anything. He just did it for himself, and he was like, nobody else cares except for myself. He was also scatterbrained. He was doing one thing, and then he sees another thing, and he goes straight to that. While he's not even done with, say, like a school project, he's doing that, and then he sees like a comic. He's like, oh, I'm gonna read this comic now, and his project isn't even done. His sister, she knows a lot about adult topics, if you know what I mean.
We got the idea. I really
Yep.
want to read this book.
It's awesome.
It's
His mother, she's also very scatterbrained. She's also works, which was also kind of different.
Yeah, she
in
worked
that
at the
time
same
period.
magazine place that his dad worked.
Yeah. So I don't think they went on trips together though. They went on separate trips.
So when you say she works, tell us why that's important to know.
Because in the 50s, women working was not a very common sight, and it was, and since he had both of his parents working, not only were they getting double the income, but his mom was also working, which was just, it was super weird for the time, because it was still like, women in the kitchen, men go to work.
Stay-at-home moms and everything. They would clean the house and whatever. So since she was working all the time, she was an awful cook. She burned everything she touched.
Yeah.
And then his father ate the food like it was amazing, and Bill just pushed it off to the side and starved. He also, like we said, he also works for a major magazine company, so he's always on the go as well as his mother.
Yeah, we didn't learn too much about it.
Yeah, they don't give you their names or anything, so you're kind of in the dark. And then his mother, she speaks her mind, very blunt about everything. She also lives in the country, away from everyone.
So you have a mom, dad, boy, girl, very nuclear family.
Yeah.
So does he talk about that idea of nuclear family?
Not?
No, not really.
Okay.
No. There you go.
Just a little bit of vocab. These aren't really like actual like dictionary words. These are mostly just words that from the time from the author. Like a memoir, there's one. It's an account based off of like what he's seen and like personal experiences. The Last Continent, that was the name of this guy's first book, which I don't know how many books he's written, but I think he's written like 2 or 3. At least I think that's what
He's written at least 2 or 3.
He's written at least 2, I know that for sure. The Des Moines Register, that was the place where his mother and his father worked. It was a sports magazine company. And like his dad, he especially got to go, like he got to go across the country all the time. And he wasn't going just for business. He was going to actually watch baseball games, which in the 50s, baseball, which is one of the things I had on my little kindergarten comic, because baseball was a very huge thing at the time, way more than what it is nowadays. Let's see here.
Foibles.
Yeah.
Pronunciation, that's exactly how it's pronounced.
Yeah, that's just human flaw. Just things that's wrong.
Everyone has their own flaws.
Yep.
True.
And regionalism, you've seen a lot of that because he lived in Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa.
Illinois. And so he generally gets like, Iowan lingo, like the culture
Just
of that area.
Midwest.
He didn't get like the areas around him.
The Midwest.
Yeah, Midwestern basically still. Okay, so this was my big question, and I was asking, how has the world changed in the aspect of safety since the 50s? And I would have to say extremely. So for one, back then it was kind of just, in like the 50s, it was more of a, you didn't really worry about it, because I don't know really how to explain it other than like, they felt invincible at the time, like nothing could hurt them. Radiation, they thought it was pretty cool. Like one of the things in here, they said that in Las Vegas, since they had like the nuclear bombs going off, not too far, but not lethal range, they would actually like have the fallout going on top of them, and it was like a contest to see, hey, who's higher radiated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was creepy.
So why do they feel, what was the word you...
Invincible?
Yeah, why do they feel that way? Does he explain that? Did you understand that?
He kind of explained it, yeah, he kind of explained it because it was kind of more carefree, things were going on, life was getting better in the sense of like, you had new appliances, there wasn't war going on. Yeah, there was tensions, but it wasn't nearly as bad as like everywhere else within like the past 100 years. It hadn't been going that bad. But like the biggest thing that was going on at the time that I didn't mention earlier was communism. He did talk about that because they had the whole Red Scare thing going on too. But it wasn't, he was talking about how since he was like in the Midwest and kind of just like a more isolated area, I guess, it wasn't nearly as bad there as it was in bigger areas. And like in the aspect of safety, I think that nowadays we do more tests. Like if you do anything, they'll be like, okay, let's do 60 million different tests on it, make sure it won't hurt you or starve you or choke you, or if it does, we'll put a label on it. Bottle cap, yep, yep.
You put a
Will
label
choke.
on it.
Not wrong. A book. Can cut self. Okay. That's what we live in.
Alright, so my big question, anyone have any good memory? Anyone like remember everything about their childhood? I definitely wouldn't. I have really bad memory. So he remembers everything about his past, and he makes it seem like all jolly old good times. But most people make their childhood seem like it's lots of fun, but when you were living back then in your childhood, it wasn't the best. So when people like recall their childhood, they make it sound like it was a bunch of fun, but it really wasn't.
Do you remember what that's called? Because we talked about that in your book clubs.
Nope.
I
Is
know.
it like
it's
selective
like
memory or
memory.
something like that? I don't know.
It's the feeling of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard that word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nostalgia is the idea of looking back and remembering, but you're remembering things better than maybe they really were.
Yeah.
and you miss those things because you're not remembering the bad parts.
Yeah, he's focusing all on the like good parts that he's lived throughout his childhood, and he doesn't like point out all the like all the bad parts in his life. He's just showing all the good stuff.
The main character was also quite pervy.
Yes, very.
Quite what?
Pervy.
Pervy.
Oh. So, when you look at this text, you guys seem to have enjoyed reading it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was fun.
So
I don't like reading,
this
but-
isn't a text which is meant to point out social flaws or
No,
this or
no.
that.
It's very entertaining though.
Yeah,
just
it's remembering the past in that entertaining way, and based on the vibe I'm getting from you, he seems to be successful with that.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
was.
Okay.
I don't like reading at all, and I enjoyed reading this book.
Yeah, there was a lot of things he mentioned in it that he did. Like one of them was, when you there was a place that he went to that when you got your groceries, you put them on the belt, you know, and it would go to the end. But it wouldn't go to the end and you bag it up. No, it would actually go down into a tunnel, and now it's basically a drive-through. And you drive through, and the guys would put it in your vehicle for you. Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
That's the old
Kessler's
coal
have
mines
one.
and pipe
I
stems,
love
too.
Kessler so much.
The old one, not the new one.
I want to say, is the sound on? Is it like high enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yay.
All right.
should be pretty much
So-
full blast.
Fair warning, you will laugh. All I have to say.
Oh.
Yeah, it kinda does. Hey, look, that one looks like a giraffe.
Huh. That one looks like a mushroom.
Okay, that was bad.
I've seen it and I'm still laughing.
I'm sorry, it wasn't perfect. We couldn't pass that up.
Okay, so tell him why you liked it.
Okay, we thought it was perfect for the 50s because I showed him on Thursday that, and we're like, well, he talks a lot about the nuclear testing because he also talked about how it was like in the Pacific and how it affected like the Japanese and the Philippines and all that stuff, and we just thought this would just perfectly.
Yeah, and then this
And
came
we
out
just-
like a couple
Yeah, it
hours.
literally came out
too.
hours before we finalized that.
Yeah,
Thursday.
and they showed it to McCausland and I after school on Thursday, and we just sat there giggling our heads off for 5 minutes, watching it over and over.
Oh, never mind. We'll go back. Let's go back. If we can.
They want to watch it again.
All right.
Yeah, it kinda does. Hey, look, that one looks like a giraffe.
Huh. That one looks like a mushroom.
It shouldn't be funny, but it is.
Okay, so before the giraffe, he sees an elephant, and then that was basically the beginning of the video. But we just wanted to
Alright.
cut it down.
Hope you enjoyed a little blast from the past.
Okay. I'll have something to say.
Critical response.
What?
Did you have a critical response? Did you
Why do you
have
mean by
a
critical response? Why, like, wasn't that what our big questions were?
Include quotations from at least 2 other sources
Oh, right, right, right.
commenting favorably or
Yeah.
unfavorably on the book, if possible, one each.
I don't think you added it, did you? No.
No.
Nope.
Boom, 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 boom.
Okay, so you want to do your other part then?
What? Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, what? Oh yeah, the drawings.
So you don't have it.
The
So
drawings?
let's talk
No,
about
give me a second. Give me a second.
Nah, you don't have time to look it up now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Garrett,
move on.
screw it,
It's
let's
on
go.
here. Nah.
Move on.
You explain pictures, you can look at it.
Blasphemy.
No, it's not.
Bullshit.
I thought I put it on there. Okay, whatever. Nuclear testing, the communism. This was kind of like show how kids were all, because at this time was also the baby boomer time, and so there was a lot of children, and there wasn't exactly technology keeping them inside. So a lot of times they go to the local parks, forests, and do just general stupid things. I did the television because the television became extremely popular at the time. Comics because comic books was one of the more cheap and entertaining things for kids to do. This is supposed to be like the little signs on the movie theaters because they said that they played like new movies like every other day. They put in new movies. I did this one, which is the worst one yet, but I did an automobile because at the time, automobiles became like a sensation, he said, and how everybody just had to have an automobile, and almost everybody then became, oh, everybody needs to have 2 automobiles now, 1 for each person, and one for each adult in the family. And then that one is supposed to represent a baseball bat and a baseball to to represent how baseball was a very cultural, important thing at the time that everybody just loved.
Okay. So I heard a lot of I did. Seth, what did you contribute to this creative
To
component?
this?
Yep.
I didn't do anything on this one.
No, I did that at home on the
Yeah.
weekend.
The rest, we both split up the PowerPoint stuff together.
Class, questions for this group?
Well, you are talking about how he talks about nothing. Did you like how he talks about something but it's all over the place? Did you like that better than a book setup with a plot would be?
Oh yeah.
For let's see here. I believe non-fiction, I would like it better with a plot, but for something that actually happened, I like this better because then it's less I want you to know my life story. It's more here's entertaining bits that you might actually like.
Was that really confusing?
At first it was because we weren't sure how it was designed, but after a while we
After
liked
after
it.
you get through the first 3 chapters, okay, there's
Yeah, it's
really
oh,
no
it's
plot,
this
so
is how
you
this
just read.
works.
So if you get lose your spot, you're okay, and you're almost done with the chapter, okay, I don't even need to read it because you just go because every chapter is something new.
Yeah.
It doesn't continue on; it's something new each chapter.
Did you like that?
Yes.
Some kids love that and some kids hate it.
I love it.
I liked it.
How do you tell what order his life is in? If it doesn't
We
go
didn't.
in order?
There, you didn't. He just says stuff, and you try to kind of puzzle
If you
it
wanted
together.
to piece it all together, you could, but we didn't. We just decided to take it for what it was at the time.
Yeah.
So, a bunch of little stories. And
Yeah, they're kind of
Basically, yeah.
short clips.
Do you
Take
know what
that
those are
video,
called?
for example.
Snippets. That's similar to Warrior Woman. We call those vignettes. Little short little segments.
Yeah.
So.
Basically, little comics almost.
I fell asleep
Mhm.
during
At the beginning of each one of them too, they also have a newspaper article.
Yep.
That were always super funny. One of them was a man was driving down the road and his vehicle swerved off into the ditch, and it was perfectly fine. And as he got out, as he stepped out to check the damages, he fell into a 50-foot cliff, into a quarry. It's oh, that would hurt.
Yep.
That'd blow.
Okay, let's give this group a hand.
Okay.